leadership is needed. We must look at our current government systems, our private sector practices, our traditional educational institutions, all with an eye for how we meet Americans in the here and now, as well as with an eye towards the future. Today, this board is putting forth a set of recommendations for how to build a resilient and agile workforce powered by our greatest asset, the skilled American workers. This document will help reframe this advisory board's work to recognize the current economic environment and lessons that can be learned from the pandemic. Thank you to all of you who have provided so much insight and so much thought into these recommendations. And really, it's been an unbelievable lift, and so much work has been done, not only in these quarterly meetings, but even more so between them. So we thank you all. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, Secretary Ross, to say a few welcoming remarks. Secretary?
Thank you, Ivanka, for your dedication to Americans' workers and for shepherding this initiative over the past year. Also, thank you for leading this timely and important call. We greatly appreciate the board members' desire to contribute immediately to the nation's economic recovery policy discussions and not wait until the next scheduled meeting in June. We also thank the board members who are working with the White House as part of the Great American Economic Revival industry groups. Your civic engagement and commitment to the future of our great nation is greatly needed right now. Since we last met, so much has unexpectedly changed for our world, our country, our family, friends, employees, and organizations. The pandemic has taken the lives of 90,000 Americans. We pray for them, their loved ones, and all those on the front line of the battle. COVID-19 also abruptly interrupted our strong economic expansion and employment rates that were at record lows. Since the shutdown, tens of millions of workers have been temporarily sidelined from the labor force, but 78% of the unemployed workers believe that that is temporary. And a new census survey of the small and medium enterprises that employ half of our workers reports that those business owners believe that the turnaround will be rapid and that revenues will at least equal or exceed prior levels. I'm pleased that our board is meeting today to discuss ideas to address the historic challenge of restoring the workforce. Your call to action is thoughtful, substantial, and timely. It outlines recommendations you have developed for a sustained effort by the administration, Congress, the states, business, labor, and educational organizations. In your own words, this call to action is profoundly urgent, and this is just the start. We will discuss the essential need to connect displaced workers to upskilling and reskilling pathways. There is no doubt that the economy will bounce back with an even more rapid adoption of new technologies, new products, and new services. Companies will need highly skilled workers to fill technical positions. Furthermore, we will confer today on the need to ensure workers have access to online tools and remote learning to guide them toward good jobs as the health crisis abates and the economy recovers. Later, we will hear updates on the Multiple Pathways campaign and on the positive progress made with the pilot projects run by the Interoperable Learning Records Working Group. Finally, Ivanka will discuss the next steps in the call to action and what will be required for all of us as members of this advisory board. We must learn and apply the lessons of this crisis and improve the resiliency of the U.S. economy. We must ensure all of society can access digital learning and the digital economy by expanding broadband access. And we must do whatever we can to reshore industries that are critical to the health, safety, and economic security of all Americans. As we look forward to the safe reopening of our economy, we must not lose sight of the fact that the implacable and deeply embedded American culture of hard work, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, and innovation remains strongly intact. The ingrained spirit of American optimism and our repeated ability to rise to any challenge provides our nation with a firm foundation for a rapid rebound. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion. I turn it over to Ivanka.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, for those remarks. And to put this into context, as everyone knows, the last time this board convened, just a few short months ago, job vacancies exceeded the number of unemployed Americans for many, many consecutive months, and the first time in history. And the mission of the board was to help more people come off the sidelines, get connected with the skills that could enable them to secure a career in the thriving economy. Now the challenge is different. It's reconnecting workers with the workforce, but it's more critical than ever. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to a few board members to frame the discussion and walk us through this specific call to action that will be presented by the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board today. First, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, followed by Barbara Humpton of Siemens, and Scott Pulsifer.
Thank you, Ivanka. Thank you, Ivanka and Secretary Ross, for bringing us together today at a moment of immense challenge and hardship for so many Americans. People are at the heart of our work on this advisory board, and now more than ever, the response to COVID-19 demands all of us to work together and to put the health and well-being of our communities and our country first. We are meeting at a time of great economic struggle for so many. We are all aware that the past few weeks have seen millions of U.S. citizens lose work, and many more are facing new financial uncertainty. No one is more important to this effort than the medical workers and public health experts on the front lines of the response, whose example of courage and compassion calls us all to do what we can to help. And all of us have a role to play in supporting their efforts, including the leaders of government, industry, education, and labor represented on this board. That means supporting emergency economic efforts underway in the immediate term to help those suffering hardships during this unprecedented time, and lending our support to the ongoing public health response that is working to contain and control the spread of COVID-19. We all share the belief that economic recovery depends on both of these efforts. But supporting the recovery also means not taking our eye off the ball in our medium and long-term work to ensure that every American can access the skills and training they need for the careers of today and tomorrow. If we continue to act with urgency, these efforts can help more American workers find new employment, regain their footing, and access the reskilling and retraining that will help build a durable career in well-paying fields like coding, engineering, healthcare, manufacturing, supply chain, IT, skilled trades, and others. Today, we are recommending approval of a national workforce recovery call to action to help the millions who need assistance now and to lay the foundations for a workforce of the future. This call to action sets out 3 important markers. The first is empowering American workers with strategic investments in the skills and career pathways that can help them the most. The second is removing obstacles to the modernization of American education and training to accelerate the reskilling that's needed now and to facilitate innovation and workforce development. The third is building the technological infrastructure that's foundational for the future of work and a sustained economic recovery. Each of these is crucial to creating opportunity and to supporting America's competitiveness in the global economy. I'll spend a few minutes reviewing the recommendations for the first goal and then turn this over to Barbara and Scott to review goals 2 and 3. To connect American workers with good jobs and employers with talented workers, our initial recommendation is about prioritizing public investments in education and workforce training that helps us adapt to dramatically impacted and reshaped labor markets. Education and training should be available for any displaced worker, and it must be relevant, valid, reliable, and accessible to put these opportunities in reach for every American. The federal government has a leading role to play here, as do state and local governments. Second, state and local leaders can bring employers and education providers together to identify the most viable hiring practices and in-demand skills that help connect displaced workers with new jobs. We can achieve this with employer-led and other training and recruiting models and the frictionless hiring being pioneered by companies like Walmart and others. Third, education and training providers must take the lead in quickly retraining and reskilling workers for new in-demand fields arising from the pandemic. These can range from telehealth and IT technical support to logistics and supply chain management, along with sustaining fields like software engineering, skilled trades, and even many service sector jobs. Fourth, policymakers and practitioners must embrace a new generation of skills development pathways offering a more direct line to a job or career than before. These include short-duration, competency-based, and earn-while-you-learn programs that help position job seekers for new opportunities as the economy rebounds. Fifth, public and private sector leaders alike must prioritize support for America's most vulnerable youth, teens, and young adults. They are America's future, and their chance at opportunity and success in work and life shouldn't be impaired due to this crisis or lost in a shuffle of need because of it. Last, the private sector must lead in growing national awareness and support for these recommendations and for the wide variety of high-quality reskilling and retraining options available to all American workers to help them build or rebuild their futures. We'll have more on that later in this meeting. Now I'd like to ask Barbara to review the next set of recommendations. Barbara?
Thank you, Tim. An important focus of the board's recommendations is removing obstacles to the modernization of American education and training. This is necessary to accelerate reskilling and facilitate innovation in workforce development. The pandemic has created urgency to modernize important but dated regulations. The American Workforce Policy Advisory Board was focused on solving these challenges even prior to COVID-19, but the pandemic has accelerated our need to take action. Now, more than ever, it's important that all the tools in the toolbox are used. This would include embracing new modes of delivery, such as online and virtual platforms. With learning technologies being made more available, there's greater reach and more reskilling opportunities as education is no longer tied to a location. This provides greater mobility for the worker and increases the chance that acquired skills match the job demand, bringing opportunities to communities around the United States. New methods should be applied across the full spectrum of lifelong learning and should address the needs of different learners, from young adults, from young students to mid-career workers. Skills development can continue throughout a career and meet the changing needs for the future of work, putting the worker in greater control of their future. There are a few specific actions we note in the second section of our recommendations. Specifically, federal, state, and local governments must unleash innovation by eliminating unnecessary regulations that impair workforce mobility. The federal government should allow student financial aid for high-quality, short-term, market-aligned credential programs that stack into lifelong learning opportunities. Education and training providers must partner with government to promote high-quality educational opportunities by measuring and publishing outcome data. And finally, education and training stakeholders must unite to assist American workers and learners in completing credentials by ending transfer credit loss. This creates a strong foundation for lifelong learning and economic mobility for American workers. However, none of these actions are possible without the technical infrastructure being in place and available. So now I'll hand over to my colleague, Scott Pulsipher, to discuss recommendations for infrastructure for the future of work.
Thank you so much, Barbara. We look forward to the continued work to remove obstacles to modernizing America's workforce. It is my privilege to outline a very motivational portion of the board's recommendation. That is building the technological infrastructure for the future of work. When we consider successful infrastructure projects of the past, it is hard to overlook President Eisenhower's grand vision for a national interstate system, of which he remarked, "I see an America where a mighty network of highways spreads across our country." Over the decades since this great infrastructure project was completed, every American has been impacted in some way by this grand vision, either personally by the convenience and safety of modern-day highway travel, or as a consumer by the effective and affordable flow of goods through our system of commerce. It is our vision that such an impactful infrastructure project must now be undertaken so as to connect every individual and the talent they possess with opportunity. This new digital infrastructure will have a dramatic positive effect on every American as it democratizes access to learning, removes time and distance barriers to work, and creates pathways to opportunity for all. As we look forward to the future, we are mindful that all Americans must be part of it. There is inherent worth in every individual, and we are simply not willing to leave any behind. Yet the current pandemic and the instant push to online distance-based everything has highlighted the acute inequity that exists among our communities and nation. Where some have smoothly transitioned from place-based work and school to remote-enabled daily life thanks to at-home high-bandwidth connectivity, others have lost vital access to education, healthcare services, and even self-sustaining goods and the so-called digital divide must be remedied. Reliable, high-bandwidth internet access is, quite simply, a matter of not only opportunity, but also livelihood. It is vital to connecting individuals to pathways leading to the future of work and society. As our current circumstance has amplified, internet infrastructure and connectivity is not simply a matter of convenience or indulgence, but rather crucial to the American dream. This is why we, as an advisory board, are recommending as a first step a swift and unprecedented investment in America's digital connectivity. Our vision is a once-in-a-generation infrastructure campaign to provide all Americans with affordable, reliable, high-speed access to online education, healthcare, and commerce. We call on the private sector to work collaboratively with government to make this vision of universal connectivity a reality. Secondly, another project that will serve as the foundation for connecting individuals to opportunities is an education-to-work lifecycle system powered by an open skills infrastructure, one that both enables individuals to articulate the knowledge, skills, and competencies they possess, and employers to communicate those same which they require. We also recognize that competency can be developed in multiple settings, both academic and work-based. We can no longer overlook this important on-the-job learning. With this open skills infrastructure, learning, training, hiring, and development would be able to utilize a common language and framework that clarify pathways and improve alignment with work. Maybe more importantly, it enables a continual learning loop and increases the propensity for an individual's lifetime of progress. The board recommends urgent action to build this open skills system. We recognize that many stakeholders must come together to make this a reality, including federal and state government and business, education, technology, labor communities, and the like. Together, we can lay this foundation for the future of work in America. Finally, with ubiquitous connectivity and an open skills system, we must refine and deploy at scale a secure, student-owned, interoperable learning record. This record will record and validate a worker's full education, skills training, and work experience, incorporating both competency and credentials, that is easily readable and validatable by employers and institutions. Our vision is that this record, as a mobile wallet of individual accomplishments, will replace the academic transcripts, strengthen workplace training, and lift American workers in their pursuit of their next opportunity. Similar to President Eisenhower's vision of a mighty network of highways spread across our country, we see these three infrastructure projects as the foundation of a mighty network connecting individuals to opportunity. With these projects completed, Americans will be empowered to pursue opportunities like never before in the history of the world. It's an aspirational vision, and we are already on the right path to make it a reality. Now is the time to invest in this infrastructure for the future. I will now turn the time back to Ivanka for further discussion on these recommendations.
Thank you all so much, and we really, really appreciate the hard work that's gone into these recommendations from you and everyone else on the board. And now we'd like to hear directly from all of you and get your response to and any feedback that you have to the comments that were made. Because we're on a conference call, I'm going to call on you directly and to make this a little bit more efficient and just try to be succinct in your answers so we can hear from as many of the members of the board as possible. So we'll start with Al Kelly, the CEO of Visa. We just heard about the need for major investment in digital infrastructure, particularly in light of the pandemic. Why is this so important to a company such as Visa, Al?
Well, Ivanka, thank you, and thank you to you and Secretary Ross for your continued leadership. Our work is as important today as it ever was. So let me address Visa specifically and then a couple more general comments. You know, there's four actions that we've taken as a result of COVID-19. The first, which I have to admit I feel very fortunate to be in the position to take this action, was that I committed to our employees globally right at the beginning of March that there would be no COVID-19 related job reductions in our company for at least this calendar year. And I think it really allowed our workforce then to get focused on their work. Second, we made immediate plans at the very early days to make sure that our employees were able to be trained and access our systems remotely. And we currently have about 95% of our workforce globally working from home, and they're able to continue to be focused on their work. We also thirdly reiterated our commitment to training and quickly moved to be a 100% distant digital learning company. We have about 80,000 training modules that cover a myriad of hard and soft subjects, and we've been holding webinars and learning challenges to aid our employees through COVID-19 with topics such as how do you successfully work in a virtual environment, and for leaders, how do they lead remote teams. And while we have a lot of courses that were available on our virtual campus, they all weren't, and we're in the process now of making sure that all classes, including ones that previously required in-person attendance, to be available in a digital form, and we're going through that conversion process now. Lastly, last week we launched well-being hours, offering employees personal time outside their office, and for the summer months, we're targeting the last 4 days of the work week, where there'll be no meetings and even meetings called by me, so that people can have a better opportunity to try to create some separation between home and work when they're home the whole time. You know, beyond Visa, this kind of working from home thing is in my mind, not temporary. I think we're realizing that work can be done from home. It saves many people from having to commute. It can reduce crowding in public transportation, and it certainly can be positive for climate with less people burning fossil fuels. So I think as a country and an advisory board, I'd advocate four things, a few referenced already from a couple of our colleagues. Broadband access for all Americans. Without it, there's going to be an increasing divide between the haves and the have-nots, and it'll be impossible to get skilling to where we need it to be. Secondly, we need to encourage all educational organizations to build their offerings in distant learning, both the quality and the quantity of those offerings. Thirdly, we need more distant learning programs to be accredited to grant certificates or other professional credentials. And lastly, we need to encourage employers to build more programs to interview, assess, and hire people remotely and digitally versus having them have to come into a particular building in a city they might not be in. So those would be the comments I would offer, Ivanka. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Al. And now I'd love to turn it over to Sherry Utash, the president of WSU Tech. We heard a lot about the need for transformation in higher education as well today. Can you walk us through a few steps that you're undertaking and why this call to action is so timely? Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Ivanka and Secretary Ross, for convening today's meeting and for advancing the work that we're doing. This pandemic has certainly highlighted that higher education must continue to have transformation. So one of the things I thought I would point out is in Kansas, the Kansas Board of Regents is designating and designing a statewide initiative with higher education that's going to create what we believe will be a competitive advantage, and we're calling it Closing the Distance in the Last Mile for Students. What that really means is that we're being challenged as universities and colleges to engage more aggressively with business and industry, to leverage existing talent recruitment and innovation by using our core capacities and capabilities of research and talent development through education and training that will result in retaining talent, improve company recruitment and expansion, along with the wealth creation through a net importation of dollars. This initiative is really designed to benefit Kansans who want more advanced job opportunities with higher wages and stable benefits. It's for businesses to become more competitive in regional, national, and global markets and to enhance and support job creation. Additionally, this initiative will align with state and federal investments and should lead to building a talent pipeline into targeted economic sectors and close a student's last mile as they complete their certificate and degrees. I would believe that these types of innovative and unprecedented collaborative efforts of business, education, and government will be essential to our recovery as a nation, and that it will provide an opportunity to connect all American workers to good jobs and employers to talented workers, and to create an education to work life cycle, which definitely aligns with all of the things that we were just presented in the new initiatives of this board's work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And now I'll turn it over to Johnny Taylor, the CEO of SHRM. Can you give us a sense on how the human resources divisions in companies both large and small are transitioning to skill-based hiring during this period of time?
Thank you. And it's really interesting. We, in a matter of essentially 120 days, have gone through three significant phases. Phase one, when we all realized that this pandemic was in fact a pandemic and was going to create issues for us, we quickly, we didn't think that we were going to send people home in significant numbers, so it was about protecting them in the workplace. When we realized that that was not possible at scale, the various local and state governments and the federal government suggesting through guidelines that we send people home, we had to quickly mobilize, understanding that there were varying degrees of success or readiness, if you will, in the various businesses. There were some businesses who did this quite easily and others who struggled. So we then moved to phase two, which is how can we make remote work work? That was difficult. It was far more difficult than many like to acknowledge, because even when you had the technological capability and the infrastructure, employees were not used to, in large part, working that way. So we spent a lot of time helping people realize that this could work. Then we moved to what is the current phase, which is the return to work phase, creating significant challenges for us, the least of which is people having varying degrees of comfort with returning to work, and we're seeing that right now. Much of the focus is on PPE and what you do when you get to the workplace, but our recent SHRM research suggests that 9 out of 10 individuals who currently or had taken public transportation to work have said that's their concern. It's not how safe will they be when they get to work. They trust that their employers are going to do the right thing to make the environment as safe as it can be, but they're very concerned about getting to work and what the experience will be for their colleagues who do take, for example, public transportation, and what risk that poses to them in the workplace. So we're in the process of working through that. From a skills development, we're using this time, all of us are the same message that now more than ever, you must operate in a new world. And unfortunately, we don't even really know what that new world is going to look like or feel like, but embracing the very work that this committee is taking on and tackling, and that is upskilling, reskilling for the jobs that won't ever come back, or when they do come back, they will be significantly different, is the challenge of the day. There are two other final issues, I think, that we are experiencing, and yesterday I was just speaking with EEOC Chair Dillon about the concern. There's a narrative that older workers, and I think it's unintended, older workers and people with pre-existing conditions are obviously at risk. That's not a narrative. They are at more risk than others. But what we're beginning to see as employers, many of them well-intended, and doing so from the right place, if you will, are making assumptions about older workers' ability to do the work, and we're essentially being very, very paternalistic and maternalistic about bringing them back into the workplace. So we're seeing companies say, if you're over 60, you can't come back, versus younger people can. Or we are a member of the National Down Syndrome Society, and people are making assumptions in some of these open jobs. Walmart, 150,000 open jobs. One of my former board members is now their CHRO. And, hiring managers are saying things like, well, we can't hire, people with Down syndrome because they have pre-existing health conditions, and therefore we don't want to put them at risk. So we're hoping that we don't find ourselves undoing a lot of the progress that we've made against ageism and discrimination against people who have disabilities in our well-intended effort to protect them. That's becoming a real issue for us as we think about bringing people back to work, is not making assumptions about groups of people or stereotypes and potentially hurting them. And then the final issue is, while we're working on our current employees' skills, the importance now that many students are being educated remotely, we're very concerned about this graduating class, high school, and for the ones who don't go on to college. High school for the ones who didn't go on to college, but even the 2020 graduate, these young folks are coming into a workplace where there are not as many jobs, they're not as plentiful, and we don't want that, our future generation of workers, to come in and many of us are old enough to have lived through 2008 when that graduating class had its issues, but the reality is they've not experienced this. In fact, none of us have experienced anything like this, and so we're trying to make sure that we find ways to keep them engaged and keep their skills strong, so that when we are ready to come back to work and rehire, that they won't have become so disengaged that we lose a generation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johnny. And you make some excellent points of things that we should proactively be doing, and also biases that employers across the country and around the world need to be cognizant of. So thank you for that. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jay Timmons, the president of NAM. Jay, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about how COVID is going to force us to rethink our supply chain and really do what the president's been talking about for some time, which is onshore a lot of companies, particularly those creating products that are in our strategic national interest. So maybe you could share with us what are some of the implications for the workforce, and how do we start preparing now for this inevitability?
Happy to do that, Ivanka. Thank you very much. And just before I get into that, just want to say personally thank you to you for demonstrating real leadership by example by wearing a facial covering in public. That is so important for our frontline and essential employees. And, of course, manufacturers have been many of those frontline essential employees making the PPE, making the medical supplies, creating the food for the food supply, and it's our obligation to protect them. and we really appreciate you doing that. As to your particular question about onshoring, we just shared, the NAM just shared our onshoring policy recommendations with the White House as well as Senate and House leaders just yesterday. And we know that this conversation is going to be front and center as we move from response to recovery, which we're in right now, to renewal. And it's very important from our standpoint that the renewal phase, and we've put together a proposal called the American Renewal Action Plan, includes supply chain and onshoring production recommendations, and that they're productive, that they're done in a productive way as we look for solutions. The main point of it all is that the way you achieve onshoring is through incentives, through making America an even better place to do business. Before the crisis, obviously, the comprehensive tax reform that was adopted, the regulatory certainty, was really driving investment and job creation from manufacturing here in the United States. As we move forward, we propose new tax credits. We propose enhanced support for research and development, and also opening the government's portfolio of surplus property to manufacturers. And central to all of this, as you mentioned, Ivanka, is recruiting and training and retaining skilled workers. If we want to expand production here, we need people with the right education and the right skills. And as I've talked about over the past year with this board, even prior to COVID, one of the biggest challenges facing manufacturers was indeed the skills gap. And that's still the case even with higher unemployment, and it's going to be even more daunting as we recover and rethink operations that really demand new skill sets. So as we say in our plan, on-the-job training will help close the skills gap, but a rapid onshoring of activity will require manufacturers to quickly get workers into jobs. So incentives need to be enacted to reduce the costs associated with training, and we want to see an emphasis on high-quality earn and learn models. New deductions should be put in place for items such as the initial setup costs, the cost of wages for learners and trainers, and other direct costs associated with these programs. And then we believe any federal funds for worker retraining should prioritize customized training programs that companies design alongside of local technical and community colleges, as we've seen be so incredibly successful. That's how you ensure that training is aligned to the jobs that need to be filled, especially locally. So those are just a few highlights, and we, of course, look forward to working with you and the administration and Congress on this because, again, to your point, Ivanka, without adequate workforce education and training, onshoring is extraordinarily difficult, and we want to make it as easy as possible to do that. So thanks for the opportunity to address that issue.
Thank you so much, Jay. And now for the final question before we move on to Secretary Ross asking for an approval for the call to action recommendations. Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture and our newest advisory board member, I'd love you to share some of the ideas around how to handle the fact that some employers are reducing their workforces at an unprecedented rate while others are looking to hire at scale but can't find enough talent. I was just yesterday with the CEO of Panera Bread, and he was telling me that he had done a deal with Walmart so that any of his furloughed employees could get hired temporarily by Walmart, and then they would return to Panera as these stores began to reopen, which was quite fascinating. But maybe you could share a little bit about what you've seen with Accenture and what you're seeing more generally on this front.
Great. Well, thank you, and thanks to both you and Secretary Ross. It's an honor to join this group and to be a part of this very important work, and thanks to all of the Council for everything you've done. It's been great to hear what you've all been working on, and I wholeheartedly agree with the views that have been expressed so far. One of the things we had focused on early on after the crisis began was the request that we were getting actually to connect many companies who were furloughing or who needed jobs, and we were getting those sort of one-off requests just because of the role that we play working with so many companies. And then also we had a group of CHROs who said the one thing that we could use right now is an easier way to connect companies who have jobs with companies who are having to furlough or lay off workers. And so we quickly worked with a few of the CHROs in a group that we have to design and put in place a platform in about 14 days, completely pro bono, of course, that now has in the U.S. over 500 companies. Walmart is one of them, and in fact, Donna, I don't know if Doug is on, just joined a call a couple of weeks ago talking about how they're using the platform as part of their goal to hire, I guess it's over 150,000 people. And what the platform essentially does is if you have jobs, you can go on it and you can search by zip code, and it's connecting it then with companies who are furloughing, and the CHROs up front designed a process so offline it would be easy to make those connections. It's been very successful so far. We continue to add people. It's also global because many of the companies in the U.S. are global companies and asked us to have this in other markets. And so there's now 1,100 companies over 60 countries, although the primary still remains the U.S. And we think this is a great example of just people coming together and sort of the beginnings of what we've talked about here in terms of needing to skill. I will say that just in terms of what we're seeing, although many, many companies like Visa, which is fantastic, have, agreed to, not do layoffs this calendar year, the reality is that there is a need to accelerate in many places the use of technology for survival and for competitiveness. And I do think there is greater urgency than there was even post-crisis, pre-crisis, where it was already quite urgent to provide for opportunities to not only connect workers as we did with this platform, but more importantly for reskilling, including current workers, because we do anticipate that as companies do adopt more technology, and we do see that will happen at a faster pace, the need for this reskilling is going to be, much faster than it was, unfortunately, just a couple of months ago. With that, I'll turn that over back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. That is an amazing example of the private sector stepping in and innovating real time to meet and rise to challenges, and it's a very exciting program. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'll turn it over to Secretary Ross now to call to approve the recommendations.
Thank you, Ivanka. The first set of recommendations was expedite American workers' return to employment. That was the presentation by Tim Cook. Is there a motion to approve that part of the recommendations?
I'll move it. Marilyn Houston.
A second?
Second. Tom Donahue.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carried. Part 2 was remove obstacles to the modernization of American education and employer-led training. And that was led by Barbara Hampton. Is there a motion to approve that part?
Move to approve, Chair Utesh.
I hear a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried. Final one was build the technological infrastructure necessary for work, presented by Scott Polk.
So moved.
Okay, I heard a motion. I heard a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried. Thank you for your unanimity.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Now I want to go quickly through a few important next steps for this advisory board. First is the development of the advertising campaign that many of you worked so hard on over the past year. I'm going to turn it over to Ginny Rometty and Tim Cook to provide a brief update. Clearly a few changes needed to be made, but I think we are getting to a very, very good place on this effort. So, Ginny, if you want to kick us off, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Ivanka. And one more time to you and Secretary Ross, not just for your leadership, but you have both been unwavering in your support of this work, regardless of the situation in the world. You've seen how important it is, so thank you for that. And I would just want to reiterate that the call to action, it does call out what are the key priorities that are the foundation for the campaign. And originally, we all knew the digital era was accelerating the need for open pathways so people could get both the skill and a job, even if perhaps they didn't have a 4-year degree. Clearly now with COVID, that's acute. And the key priorities that the call to action focus on that really will underpin now the revised campaign are skills first, new generation of pathways, and that actually these will be the feature in this campaign. And so we took a look at what we had done, as Ivanka said. All the work was just about ready to roll, but we did feel the campaign had to be changed to reflect the new reality of the world. You might remember prior, the focus of the campaign was about new rules and try something new. Well, now, with so many people dislocated, they need short, flexible education pathways, they need them in volume, and obviously the reskilling that's going to have to go on. We're changing 3 things. Number 1, there'll be a new message on the campaign, and while we're tuning the tagline, it will be something in the spirit of find something new or you've got options. Number 2, the creative, what you visually had seen prior, is going to change a bit, and the tone, of course, though, will still be optimistic and positive because there are alternatives there. And then the third thing we're changing, and it's actually become more important now, is the website content. And so we want to give not just students, but also mid-career people the opportunity to build those skills. And think about the website now. It'll have details on education pathways, for example, certifications that would end up in a job, better paying job. The pathways would include a very wide variety: apprenticeship, associate, certificates, early college, online, vocational, trade. In fact, Ivanka and Scott hosted the virtual tour before, and while we were already including a number of those organizations that enable these pathways in the website, I heard new ones there, and I think they will all be added and make a very good short pathway from seeing a campaign about I have options to actually finding what they are. Because many of these pathways and programs have not received the attention they deserve, and they're really valuable now, given the COVID situation as we recover. So net bottom line, the teams, all of our teams have worked very hard, and there will be a new creative, and we are targeted and committed. I shouldn't say targeted. We are committed, doing a lot of work that we will now launch mid-June. So before I pause, let me ask if Tim would like to add any other comments.
Yeah, sure, Jenny. I agree with Jenny on the need for this new ad and the website direction. People really need help now, and this campaign can help provide that. Our overarching goal is to broadcast out a tone and message of hope and action that is relevant to any individuals whose job or career plans were suddenly upended by the health crisis. We want it to be simple and straightforward and provide useful resources that help immediately in the current environment, yet also help build job security and career development over the long haul. I think that's very important. We have a well of vital, high-quality resources on our website in which to help. I, too, would like to commend Ivanka and Secretary Ross and their teams for their leadership and commitment to one of the most important things that any of us can be working on. And I also commend all the advisory board members who have contributed their time and staff and resources for what promises to be a critical national mobilization of support for the American worker at a time they and all of us need it the most. Back to you, Ivanka.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Jenny, for that great update. Now, I would like to ask Scott Pulsifer to join us and let us know where things stand in the development of the interoperable learning records and a status on the pilot. So, Scott, if you don't mind, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivanka. And again, we extend our gratitude to you and to Chris Liddell and the great team in the White House who have shepherded the Interoperable Learning Record Project effort. Both work and the way adults learn have changed, and they continue to change rapidly. Today, workers are learning and adding skills throughout their lives, often changing careers several times, and they need a frictionless way to document and share their record of learning with employers and other institutions of higher education. This is why the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board champions the fast-tracking of prototyping among board stakeholders in the interoperable learning record ecosystem to quickly bring an ILR to market. This action has put us in a position to advance rapid adoption of skills-based learning and hiring. I'm proud to announce today that 4 ILR pilots have emerged from these efforts, with Walmart, IBM, Workday, and Salesforce each leading one of these pilots. I would like to briefly highlight the pilot that Walmart is leading. This project, a collaboration among Workday, LinkedIn, IBM, and WGU, will enable a new level of information sharing for individuals, companies, and institutions. ILRs provide employers with new efficiencies, put individuals in control of their learning records, and provide individuals with more control over their careers. There are still some outstanding issues to consider, including the ongoing governance for skills definitions and technology standards, but the project is going well, and it is expected to launch this fall. Walmart has identified 3 retail roles for the initial pilot: front-end team associate, front-end team lead, and online grocery pickup team associate. They've been working with their internal subject matter experts to map the skills for these specific roles as the tech teams work to build the ILR prototype to make it easily accessible for users. Equally important are the ongoing efforts and discussions regarding the longer-term governance of the standard and skills ontologies. This is a crucial enabler for adoption and the long-term viability of ILRs and the skills-denominated future. To date, several American Workforce Policy Advisory Board members, along with White House staff, are engaged in defining approaches to governance, and we appreciate the opportunity to be part of those discussions going forward. We would also be remiss if we did not acknowledge the incredible work on ILRs being done in the other 3 pilots, which are led by IBM, Workday, and Salesforce. And WGU is fortunate to be involved in several of these pilots, including that one led by Walmart. At a high level, there are a few things I'd like to note about how these projects are progressing. First, my observation of the incredible collaboration among varied organizations that has brought these pilots to fruition. This collaboration is a clear signal of a shared and singular mission: to do what is right and best for individuals, the students and workers, as they chart their personal paths to the future of work. Second, the pilots are coalescing around and advancing open, interoperable standards. The commitment to such consistent, supportable, and usable standards and protocols is vital to the adoption of and the enablement of the adoption of an ILR and the enablement of that skills-denominated education to work future. These pilots are early evidence of the various partners' collaboration and will help build toward the anticipated large impact and broad benefits which interoperability will bring. And we're already coalescing around the necessary data standards and tools that connect student and HR information systems. Lastly, of course, these ILR efforts build off the great work and initiatives developed and promoted through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So we want to thank the Chamber for their leadership as well in this space. They have truly been a great partner. Some may ask why ILRs matter. Implemented at scale, the interoperable learning record has the potential for enormous effect, both for employers and for individuals. ILRs will enable a labor market that efficiently matches employers and qualified job seekers, a highly aligned, relevant, dynamic education sector that adapts to gaps and demands in the job market, and enabling individuals with a clear understanding of the skills they possess and those yet needed to develop. That is our future reality, enabled by the interoperable learning record and the technology, protocols, and standards that power it. WGU is humbled to be a part of this work that activates the individual and enables the future of work and better connects talent with opportunity. We look forward to continuing to do our part in both developing and scaling ILRs into our future. Thank you, Ivanka.
Thank you so much, Scott. As we've talked about, these ILRs have the ability to be truly transformative. So I'm very grateful for the board and folks outside of the official board. Their great work on this. Thank you very much for the update. Finally, I want to let everyone know that the work we've outlined here today is still obviously very much needed, and there is a real desire to keep this group of dedicated leaders intact, which is why the President will soon be announcing an extension of the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board and the Interagency National Council for the American Worker. We are hoping to extend this for an additional year to continue these projects, to pivot where necessary, and to see them all come to fruition. We hope that many of you will remain on and continue this important work for the benefit of American workers and students. Finally, we are scheduled to meet again, very hopefully in person, on June 26th. I'm very much looking forward to it and to continuing the work in the weeks and months ahead. So thank you all for your participation and dedication, and stay healthy and stay safe. Take care, everyone.